Okay, you feel free to get started anytime.
Okay, great. I'll start. Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome. My name is Amy Leno, and I'm the Individualized Learning and Belonging Lead from the International School of Helsinki. And I'm also incredibly honored and a proud member of the Inclusive Special Interest Group for ECIS. And we're very excited today to welcome Beth and Jérémie. But before we begin, just a few reminders to mute yourself, and there'll be time to put questions into the chat after the session is done or as the session is closing. And just a kind reminder to observe confidentiality of the people and your school. Maybe it might be helpful and lovely to just quickly put in the chat where you're coming from, where you're joining us from today. And as we do this, I also want to make a special shout out to the Inclusive Special Interest Group, a small but mighty team who are kind of focused on thinking about how we can provide professional learning opportunities to lead practice for all students. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our webinar speakers today. So Jérémie Rostan has played a pivotal role in shaping the landscape of international education, and his contributions as an innovator and author have been widely recognized, including the recent launch of the free micro-credential program, AI at School, Effective and Responsible Integration, developed in partnership with Digital Promise. And he's a driving force behind a comprehensive collection of resources available on his website, which are tailored to empower school leaders and educators in their pursuit of inclusive and innovative excellence. And Jérémie is currently serving as the high school curriculum and instruction coordinator at the International School of Panama. And we welcome Beth, who serves as a UDL and inclusionary practice consultant for international schools. With 16 years in the IB system, she works closely with schools to equip and empower educators and leaders in developing learner-centered systems of support, integrating accessible technology, and fostering inclusive inquiry for all learners. And Beth's passions for reducing barriers through UDL trace back to her early years as a teacher of students who are blind and visually impaired, and she currently serves the co-chairperson for the UDL-IRN Implementation Special Interest Group. And additionally, she is an ISTE certified educator and CPACC certified member of the International Association of Accessibility and Professionals. We are super excited to get started, so I think I'll turn it over now to Beth and Jérémie, and welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks. And we're so pleased to see all of these familiar names in attendance. We're so grateful for this opportunity. Thank you for that warm introduction, Amy. And thank you also to the Inclusive Ed Special Interest Group for inviting us on to share about Ludia, which is a chatbot that is designed to partner with educators and instructional designers to reduce learning barriers. So we are going to be covering 4 topics in our 60 minutes together. We want to make sure everyone understands the basics of what the UDL framework is. We're also going to be talking about how Ludia came to be and what Ludia really is and how it can impact your practice. And we're going to be also exploring different ways that Ludia can support you in reducing learning barriers. And last but not least, we're going to make sure that everybody has a chance to be self-directed and play a little bit with Ludia, connect with other educators, and then come back together and share what you've discovered. And then hopefully we can generate some more ideas together. And I do want to take a minute to say that in the audience, we have Jane Pletzer. And Jane was one of my heroes and a huge UDL advocate when she served in the IB as the Director of Inclusion. And I just wanted to say, I'm so honored that you're here today, Jane. And I know that you're probably not going to open up your mic, but I know that you're now retired, but the fact that you're still so dedicated to UDL is incredibly inspiring. So I'm sorry, I'm like fangirling right now. Thank you for being here, Jane. All right, so moving forward. Deep breaths. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about what the UDL framework is together. It's definitely an acronym that we're all very familiar with, but we may not always be able to really articulate what universal design for learning is. It was originally developed by CAST, which is an organization in the northeast of the US that is really dedicated to reducing learning barriers and to supporting more inclusive learning design for learners throughout the world. And they do so by tapping into cognitive neuroscience and other related forms of research to inform pedagogical practice and instructional design approaches that are flexible and very innovative. So I often say that UDL is one of the oldest, newest acronyms in the world of inclusive ed. So when you look at UDL through the lens of simply being a systems framework, you're really only seeing half of the picture. Because in order to be a person or a fan of inclusive education who's dedicated to removing barriers for learners, you really need to internalize over time 3 key understandings. And the first understanding is that all learners can learn at very high levels. And it's up to us to work with them and empower them by reducing barriers. And when I use the word all, I'm really excluding the word most or many. And that means designing to the edges and really challenging ourselves when we're thinking about how we oftentimes design for the mythical average learner. The second is really prioritizing accessibility and knowing that until those barriers to accessibility are identified and removed, we really don't understand the potential of all learners in our learning communities. And third, one of my favorite, is understanding the importance of embracing learner variability and knowing that even though our neurological structures and the process of learning is, of course, the same, just in the same way that we all have hearts that, beat, the actual orchestra inside of our brains is unique to each and every one of us. And so instead of trying to look through the lens of the mythical average learner, the IB now also encourages us to embrace learner variability. So let's get practical. Those are all of the beliefs and the underpinnings of UDL. But when you're looking at learning and trying to figure out how to reduce barriers, the best thing to do is to familiarize yourself with the UDL guidelines and checkpoints. So as you can see here, there's 3 lovely colors: light green, purple, and blue. And those columns are the 3 UDL principles. And those are based on, of course, that orchestra in our brain, those 3 neural networks that are always working together to create lived learning. And so those represent the origins and categories of variability in all learners. Moving forward, you also see here we have 9 UDL guidelines. And within those quadrants, you'll see the design components. So when you hear me using the word design, I'm really talking about what we as teachers know as, prep and planning. And of course, that is a cyclical process, and it's best embraced as a design process. So these are the 9 components, and they are scaffolded. So the first row, recruiting interest, perception, and physical action, are the access components. So that's the first place that we're always going to look when it comes to identifying and reducing barriers. Well, I shouldn't say always, but it's wise to start there. And last but not least, prepare for cognitive overload. There are 31 checkpoints, and these 31 checkpoints represent actions that we can all take to reduce barriers through the intentional identification of them throughout the learning process. Naturally, it's always best to do that before, the curriculum is in action in our classrooms, but it can also provide a lot of guidance for us throughout the learning cycle. And so if you want to learn a little bit more about the why of UDL, which is the goal of UDL, in your note-taking template, which you had a link to in our invitation, you will see a one-pager that explains in more depth about expert learning, because that's the goal. So at the bottom of the UDL guidelines and checkpoints, you can of course see that the goal is to reduce barriers for all learners, so they all have the opportunity to develop as purposeful and motivated and resourceful and knowledgeable and strategic and goal-directed expert learners.
So what does this all have to do with AI, right? That's the question. So as Beth explained, the UDL framework is obviously very rich and complex in a good way, but it's very rich. So depending on the situation, the teacher might be, let's say, planning a new lesson, or maybe it's in the moment, something just happened in class and I'm reflecting on the day. I might not have the time or the knowledge yet to go through this whole UDL framework. And I need a partner, a third partner to implement UDL. That's where Ludia comes in. So I'm not going to go technical on the AI side, but to give you a very sort of brief context. Ludia runs on Claude, which is a large language model. And what that means is it has learned patterns in human language. It's been trained on very vast amounts of data and has learned patterns in human languages. I say languages because we chose Claude for different reasons. One is it's much better than GPT, for instance, for a variety of languages. It's also better at imitating human sounding language. It tends to be more creative as well. So we have this foundational model that is trained on vast amounts of data, and that is very much a generalist. By design, it has very vast general knowledge. What we have with Ludia is a mega prompt. So what a prompt does is think of it as a vector. So it has a position and a direction. So that prompt is going to tell Claude, here's what you should focus on. Of all of your knowledge, of this mass of knowledge, focus on this and use these to help me go there, right? That's the mega prompt. And based on that, what the Gen AI does is it predicts what an expert would say. If you were an absolute expert in UDL and you had read all the research and you had access to various contexts and you had learned so much about education and human society, etc. And I would ask you this particular question, what would you say? So I know that's what we have, and I'm going to show you. We are already thinking about Ludia 2.0 and even 3.0. 2.0 would be Ludia on its own website, running on GPT-4. And that would be an intermediary step to sort of the last step that we can see for now, which is fine-tuning a model using all this data. So let me go ahead and share my screen so I can show you what it looks like and how to use it. I'm sorry, did I skip your slide, Beth?
Sorry about that.
Did I skip your slides? Did
That's
you want to
okay.
take on? Yeah.
No, actually, go for it, Jérémie. It's totally
Okay. So whenever we use Ludia, what we recommend is using the 4 T's, which are sort of 4 steps that stand for tell, incur, tweak, and transfer. So I'm going to show you what that looks like in practice. And as I'm doing that, I will also try to explain the difference between what Ludia does and what a bot like ChatGPT would do. So the first thing that you can see is Ludia sort of scaffolds for you the kind of information it needs, right? It's telling you, please share your subject, the grade level, the learning goals, maybe the design challenges. And if you have information about language profile of your students, their strength, their interest, their cultural identity, that will be very helpful, right? If I were to go on ChatGPT, as you probably know, it would just tell me, well, nothing. I could just input whatever. I would not be as guided. So let's take a worst case scenario where something just happened and I'm just frustrated. I don't have the time for the thinking. So I'm just sharing my grade 9 math students. That's algebra 1. They are disrespectful. They don't listen. After everything, just help. Right. So I'm not following Ludia, but it's just to compare fairly with what ChatGPT would do. So I'm going to run this on Ludia here. And then I'm also going to run it on ChatGPT. And the first thing you will see, so I'm going to wait until ChatGPT loads. Great. So the first difference is, as you can see, the way Ludia starts the conversation is what we call the UDL mindset. It's going to frame it for you in such a way that what I expressed as my frustration of them being disrespectful is going to say, well, the barrier lies in engaging and motivating the students, right? So it's not a deficit approach where the students are at fault because they misbehave. There is a disconnect between what they need and what we're offering in terms of instructional design. ChatGPT is going to be very nice, but it's just going to be telling me, oh, I'm sure that's challenging, here's what you can do. So it doesn't help me develop this mindset where the issue is not in the students, it's in the lack of adaptation of the design to their needs, right? So that would be the first difference. A second major difference is on Ludia here, I have the option to upload attachments. So when you go and play around with Ludia, you can do that. So I'm going to share one here. So I'm going to share it's a fake math 9 formative that I created for this purpose. And I'm just going to ask, well, why did my students not engage with this format, right? And this format, it's a bunch of grade 9 level math exercises. And as you can see, it's going to give me feedback and tell me again what might explain the lack of engagement and misbehavior of the students, saying, well, seems like based on what you just shared, there might be barriers there's not much relevance there. There are not many choices offered. There's no flexibility. And it's going to give me 3 sort of options that I can explore. Very different from what I get from ChatGPT, where I'm going to get a lot, right? I'm going to get, depends on 10, so then it's 15, so then it's 20. And it's just a list of things you can do, right? So that helps me on the spot, that here's 10 things you can do. But the next time around, I need to go back to ChatGPT and ask again, right? What Ludia does is, if I go back here, because it's based on the UDL framework, it sort of categorizes its suggestions to help me understand them. For instance, okay, one is lack of relevance. One is you don't have enough options for action and expression. What that does is, over time, I build an understanding of what students need, and how I can adapt instruction to meet those different needs. And the the last thing I wanted to show you the difference is obviously, as you can see, Ludia gives me options to choose from. And it's going to encourage me to follow the conversation, to continue the chat. So of those options, which one do you want to explore, right? It's even going to give me here every time ideas for questions I can ask to follow up, right? If I'm on ChatGPT, it ends by saying, best of luck, but the conversation ends there. So if I go back to the 4Ts, the thinker is sort of missing from ChatGPT. Thinker is once I've told what I'm looking for and I get the feedback or the response from the bot, it's going to be a back and forth. It's going to be a conversation. But Ludia is a thought partner. I'm going to ask for clarification to go more in depth about one of the ideas, or maybe to change course and look at something else, right? This back and forth is not encouraged, or it's not you're not prompted to do so by ChatGPT. Quick would be once I have my sort of action plan that is given to me by Ludia. I'm still going to adapt it to my context even more, and I'm going to, as we say, keep a human in the loop, right? So I'm not going to just do what Ludia does or tells me to do. I'm going to make it my own, adapting to my own unique school context. And the transfer would be once I have tried in class, learned, adapted, I might be able to scale, so change my practice, change this new option, routine approach, or share it with some colleagues. But
I'm getting there. Thank you so much,
Oh.
Jérémie. I really appreciate the fact that you shared such a clear example. And you touched upon one of the main goals, which is for Ludia to act as an ongoing thought partner for deepening our understanding and application of the UDL guidelines and checkpoints. So quite often you may have noticed in the responses that it was following a number, so 3.1 or 9.2, and those numbers are actually the codes that you will find for each checkpoint on the UDL framework. So as you're kind of receiving that slow drip to deepen your understanding about, intentionally designing to reduce barriers, you're also working to, leverage the predictions of Ludia to take action, the same day or tomorrow in your classroom. And so just a couple of other things to mention about Ludia is that it also understands and responds in multiple languages. There is an app that's offered for free from the Platform for Open Exploration, which at the moment is hosting Ludia. And it's accessible via browser or on, of course, any Android or OS device. And last but not least, it's accessible through both typing and voice typing. We would love to see it actually become even more accessible and have that text-to-speech be added. And so, yeah, we're also working to reduce barriers. We are focused on the experience of partnering with Ludia to be, of course, a very inclusive experience for everyone.
And we haven't said so, but just to be very clear, it's 100% free to use to whatever extent. It will always be free, and there's no tiers of service or subscription. It's not like if you subscribe and pay, you get more out of Ludia. You have full access for free forever for anybody.
That's really a good point to bring up, Jérémie, because as the PO platform is growing, a lot of people are prompted to subscribe. And I always encourage them to just X out and ignore. It's not necessary and it will not improve your experience. So as Jérémie demonstrated with that example that he ran in both ChatGPT and Ludia, Ludia will guide you to identify the barrier and clarify the goal. And as Jérémie mentioned, the barrier is not within the learner. So it's within the design of learning and learning spaces. And there's always something more that we can do through iterative design to, make learning more engaging and accessible. So instead of taking a reactive approach by adopting a brand new strategy, Ludia is going to instead guide you back to increasing autonomy, making sure that the learning is meaningful to the learners. It's going to also remind in a gentle way how important it is for learners to have options for action and expression. And the second principle being representation. So making sure that learners can access through multiple means of representation. In doing so, it also really reduces your cognitive load when it comes to leveraging the UDL framework. We know that even though the UDL framework is incredibly powerful, it can be really overwhelming. And it's very difficult for people to be sitting at their kitchen tables, planning for, next day's learning and trying to identify and determine which barriers they need to work to reduce in the moment. And so, this is a tool that is designed for educators. And we want to not just leverage AI to make your life more efficient. We want you to be having that slow drip, contextually specific professional learning experience through UDL whenever you choose. And so those are just some of the features that we wanted to mention. We've been talking for a long time, and even though that's fun for us, we want to make sure that in our time together, you are self-directed and empowered as learners too. So we want to present some choices for breakout rooms. Oh, it's great to see everyone trickle back in and also some new faces. So welcome back, everyone. We wanted to make sure that as we close out, we can first and foremost give everyone a chance to share any findings or interesting approaches that they discovered in their time together in groups. Before doing that, I just wanted to quickly share my screen and point you in the direction of the Ludia bookshelf. So when you have time or if you're interested, just know that this is hot linked on the website. And these are just free books that are really designed for anyone and everyone to explore Ludia a little bit more. And again, it's running on a mega prompt. You don't need to have perfect wording or phrasing in order to leverage Ludia, but certainly there are different sentence frames that might help you get headed in the right direction. So that's what those 3 books are. So I'm gonna turn it over to all of you and just let me know if you want to open up your mic and share any questions or discoveries that you found in your groups.
So another one I wanted to share.
Rana, would you like to share with the group? You don't have to turn your video on if you don't want to. It's totally fine. I know she wasn't feeling very well today. All right.
I can share.
Yes, go for it. Hi, Chad.
Oh, sorry, Rana, sorry, just trying to unmute. Yeah, but we had some good discussions just about who's trying Ludia already, and then and we haven't tried it as a school, and so I was kind of asking how are schools kind of looking at this tool? Are they starting, like when you go to schools, Beth, are you starting just with questions? Like, let's put questions out there that we are wondering or that we're finding challenging, or are you starting kind of on the back end and, let's put in a lesson example, or let's put in assessment, attachment, and then talk about the feedback that we get from that. And so we were kind of discussing a little bit about starting points, and still don't know what the great way is, but maybe you can
I-
Share what you do.
I'll give you a really short answer, which is that we developed the Ludia starting points sentence frames book that is on the book creator bookshelf for that very reason. So those are really solid starting points, and pretty much they run the gamut. So if you hand that over to a group of teachers, the goal is to reduce barriers, and it encompasses quite a lot of questions that people can paraphrase and make their own, and explore.
Yeah, I think I'm ready to
Go
share
for
my
it, Ron.
perspective on how I found Ludia useful, not only to identify barriers and to explore different ways of how we can present a teaching point or an outcome or anything like that, but also it served for me as an educator to reflect on my practices and to learn more on how I can improve. Sorry, I can provide opportunities to meet the needs for all learners. And having that in the back of my mind when planning has helped me a lot. And sometimes I read something, I'm like, oh, I never thought about that. So there is a lot when I read, and especially it takes you deeper into identifying barriers and giving different options. Then I learn more even about my learners. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but that's been my experience.
I just want to say thank you for sharing that. It's just, yeah, it brings a smile to my face, because ideally we designed Ludia to be a bridge for ongoing professional learning that is not going to trigger cognitive overload, and it's going to really help for everyone to internalize those UDL mindsets. So thank you for sharing that, Rana. Anyone else like to share?
Hi, may I speak?
Of course, Elif, it's good to see you.
See you too. I'm sorry I joined you so late, last 10 minutes really, because it was 7 a.m. in the morning and I had to drop off my son to school, and then I immediately came back and decided to join, though it was so late.
We're
Somehow.
glad that you're here.
Embarrassed.
You're joining us from Turkey, right?
No, I'm joining you from Houston.
Oh, excellent. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're here.
Actually, I'm in the United States, but I'm supporting UDL implementation in Turkey.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, universities and some schools.
Mhm.
So I'm supporting them. That's why I joined late, but this webinar is awesome because I want to rewatch, of course, because I missed most part of it. But Ludia is a great tool, I can say that. And I cannot share my experience before listening to what you have covered, but I want to thank you all for arranging this webinar. This is really good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's our pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's a good end point, no? Good way to end.
Such a lovely end. Thank you, Elif. All right.
It's my pleasure. Thank you all for organizing this. This is awesome.
I think as we close out, we just want to remind everyone that inclusive learning design doesn't happen overnight. It's really important for all of us to demonstrate, patience and persistence, those values and attributes that we are trying to encourage in our learners. And to know that, we're not alone. There's a community behind reducing learning barriers that's growing by the day. We're so grateful that the ECIS Inclusive Education SIG invited us on to run this webinar, and that it will be accessible for everyone through a recording. So thank you again for the invitation. Thank you. And thank you so much to everyone who joined as well.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Jérémie, for joining us. There is going to be like a little bit of a follow-up on UDL, because I know, Beth, you're going to be at International School of Helsinki with Amy, And then she's going to be following up with some of her team members on co-teaching and UDL principles also on February 13th. So I just put in the chat group just a list of different ECIS events that are coming up in the next couple of months, so everybody can check out. But thank you all so much. And we'll also post the link to the recording of this video. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah, signing off. Thank you again. Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
Beth and